All right. Well, any questions from anybody today? Babylonian exile. Y'all are quiet. Okay. Well, Bob's still logging on, and Abby doesn't have anything. Abby actually did have a question about Babylonian Jews and all, what it was like for them, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, it is fascinating that the Pope actually went to Babylon, to Iraq, this week, first time ever. And so we'll talk about the Pope's visit next week, just a tad, because we've got Christians in Iraq still to this day in Babylon, but there are very few Jews, and we'll talk more about that next week. There was a large Jewish community until 1948, and we'll talk about that next week. But it was fascinating that the Pope actually was there this week. Yeah, Bob, was that?
Good question. Yeah, until I figure it out. So going from the four living creatures in the first vision of Ezekiel,
Right.
How did they get to the portrayal of the four gospels as the four living creatures?
I will address that a little bit. So that's a good question.
And I'll try and log on.
Very good. Other questions or thoughts here? All right, well, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see, share screen, advanced. Share Zoom menu. There we go. Let's bring this over to. Sorry, have this ready. I did a Zoom on Wednesday for Holy Trinity Midland as part of their Lenten series on Zoom. So everything is geared for them, looks like. Yeah. That was kind of nice. So I didn't have to drive 2 hours down and 2 hours back to do the talk. I could just log in.
Brian has said the same thing about holding court sessions. It's so nice he doesn't have to like fly to Fort Worth or fly to Beaumont. They can just do it online.
That spoils you in some ways. Yeah. My rule of thumb used to be, if I'm going to drive, the meeting needs to at least be as long as the one-way trip. If it's not as long as the one-way trip, then I'm really wasting my time. But anyway, yeah, we are spoiled by this. I think I will make some changes. Well, we are in the midst of the Jewish exile here. Rivers of Babylon, great line from Psalm 137 we'll talk about. And we've had two main deportations of the Jews to Babylon. The elites, kind of the upper classes, there really wasn't a huge middle class back in the day. So kind of the upper classes, the educated classes, were taken off, partially in 597 and then more in 586. Remember, the prophet Ezekiel went as part of that first wave. Jeremiah also mentions a third wave that we have no other evidence about, somewhere in the neighborhood of 581. So good question about that. The peasant class would have been left on the land, though they brought in some other people from other parts of the Babylonian Empire, just like the Assyrians did. The Assyrians and the Babylonians had a strategy of mixing folks up, so we didn't have rebellion as likely. Rebellion still happened, but it was less likely. The Persians had a very different strategy. We'll get to that in the future. They were kinder, gentler compared to the Assyrians and Babylonians. The quintessential psalm that comes out of this period is by the rivers of Babylon. By the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept. And we remembered you, O Zion. Just a horrible, horrible lament psalm from one of the Jewish writers here. We hung up our harps on the trees, couldn't even sing songs anymore. Those of you who know the play Godspell, this is the very sad lament song that's sung as Jesus is preparing for his passion. In the background, they're singing this. On the willows there, we hung up our lyres. For our captors there required of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. But how can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Very, very sad. Bob Nebb actually shared with me a whole different version, different music, different tune, different lyrics arrangement reggae. So it was kind of fun actually. Not quite as lamentful and mournful, but it must have been a horrible thing to be taken away from your homeland and carried off into exile like that. So this is undoubtedly one of the darkest chapters in Jewish history. Really, the only three big contenders are the Babylonian exile and destruction of the temple in 586, or maybe the Romans destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD and destroying the temple, the next temple, the rebuilt temple, yet again, or maybe the Holocaust in the 20th century, mid 20th century, in World War II era. Those are the three most traumatic things, and different historians will disagree about which was the most traumatic. I mean, pick your tragedy. These are all horrible things, but this is right up there. But the fascinating thing and the great paradox here is that while this is a tragedy, while this is horrible, while this is mournful, it also changes the Jewish people for the next 2,500 years until up through today. Really, Judaism as we know it really is formed in this crucible, cemented together in the midst of this Babylonian exile. And usually if a nation was taken off into exile like this, they disappear from history. And yet the Jews came back, they bounced back stronger than ever. They really got, at this point, we've seen over and over again so far, the Jews falling away, following other gods, not being that faithful to Jewish practices. And yet they come out of the Babylonian exile as zealot is probably too strong a word, but they are fervent in trying to find ways of being Jewish. We're going to do circumcision. We're going to be serious about doing circumcision. We're going to observe kosher dietary regulations and be serious about doing that. We're going to keep Jewish holidays. We're going to follow the Torah. In other words, they come out of this experience as practicing those practices that will hold them together for the next 2.5 millennia. And it will allow them to, even after they're destroyed again and scattered by the Romans, it'll still allow them to have cohesion without a homeland. From 70 AD till 1948 AD, there is no Jewish nation as far as a nation state, and yet they cohere as a people through all kinds of stuff. And it really is these practices forged in this Babylonian crucible that allow them to do so. The book said this, I may have quoted this before, maybe last week, I'm not sure, but it's a good reminder here. In addressing the Judean exiles in Babylonia, P, the final editor and the priestly editor of most of the Torah, is concerned not only with the past, but also their present and their future. How could we preserve our religious identity in a foreign land? And the answer comes by being faithful to God, by observing Sabbath, dietary law, circumcision. And he also notes that these things are not things you have to do in a temple. You don't have to rely either on having the monarchy present. You can still observe Jewish dietary regulations, whether or not there's a Jewish king on a Jewish throne over a Jewish nation state or not, whether or not there's a temple in Jerusalem that you can sacrifice to. So the Judeans, the Jews, no matter where they might be, could keep Sabbath, circumcise their son, maintain purity in diet, and other matters. So it really is a formative, hugely important time in Jewish history. Really, what we call Judaism, it technically does not exist until the Babylonian exile. It really coheres in a way it never had when they were in their homeland before that. So thoughts or questions before I keep going with that? It's a huge piece. All right, well, we looked at this before, the 1,000, maybe it should be 10,000 foot view, but of all these empires. And I mentioned that if you look at the dates on all these empires, a lot of them have long-standing domination periods of centuries. Babylon is less than a century, 526 to 539. So it's one of the shorter empires in this succession of empires in the Middle East. And yet, because Jerusalem is destroyed, because the Jewish people are formed in the way that we recognize them, this is a hugely important empire, kind of far outstripping the dates. Less than a century for dates, but Babylon has a huge influence on what will happen later. So we're talking about 626 to 539, really 597 when the exiles start. And the king of Babylon, the big king at this point, is the great Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar also is mentioned in the Bible as Nebuchadrezzar, just to make it confusing. But Nebuchadnezzar II is the dominating figure during both of these conquests of Jerusalem, and he was dominant in Babylonian history, hugely important. He's the big kahuna in Babylonian history. Nebuchadnezzar's dad was a Babylonian who worked for the Assyrians because the Assyrians were in charge. But then he rebelled and he set himself up as king of Babylon, and his son would become his heir. And Nebuchadnezzar was actually the one that fought a decisive battle. The Assyrians were already waning in power, really out of power in the area, but Babylon hadn't really cemented their hold on the area until 605, and Nebuchadnezzar put the nail in the coffin of the Assyrian Empire at that point. We talked about Pharaoh Necho before. He killed King Josiah, the Jewish king, the good Jewish king, 4 years earlier. And so Babylon defeats Assyria and Egypt allied together, and they're top dog then for decades to come, most of the 6th century BC. So, however, even though Babylon's the top dog, for whatever reason, Judah, the kings of Judah play power politics. We saw this last week. They rebel twice, and Babylon responds pretty decisively, and even more decisively the second time. They wipe out Jerusalem's walls. You're not a city without walls. You can't defend yourself. They wipe out the temple. They wipe out the king's palace. It's a pretty brutal put down of the second rebellion. Oh, you didn't get the idea 11 years ago? Well, here, squish. We're going to make sure you get a stronger idea of our power now. And as we've talked about, they took thousands of the elite of Judah to live in Babylon in various waves. Just real quick, Babylon is a smaller empire than what was before and what is after. They did not control Egypt. They did not control what will become Persia. But they did not control the remnant of Assyria up here. But they still controlled a pretty good chunk, including Jerusalem and what we call Israel today. So, and Syria and Lebanon and up into parts of Turkey and Iraq. Iraq is Babylon historically. Iran is modern Persia historically. So, same areas of the world. Let's talk about Babylon real quick. Babylon is a city name as well as an empire name, which can be a little confusing, and a people name. So there is a city of Babylon. It is in the Middle East, the largest ruin, biggest, most spread out geographic ruin in the Middle East. So it must have just been an amazing city in its heyday. 2,000 acres is what the ruins cover from Nebuchadnezzar's day. By comparison, Texas Tech's campus is 1,839 acres. So even bigger than Tech's giant campus was this city of Babylon. And the population of Babylon was about the population of Lubbock, about 250,000. Now you might say, 250,000 people in a city the size of Tech's campus? Well, they didn't have 19th Street with 6 lanes. They did not have front yards that required watering. Their houses were not as big, so you could cram a lot more people into a smaller chunk. By comparison, Jerusalem in Jesus' day was about 100,000 people in a city about 3/4 of a mile by 3/4 of a mile. So you can live more compactly if you don't have a front yard, a backyard, and a big living room, and extra garage, and all the things we have to have. They didn't have. But think the city of Lubbock crammed into an area the size of Texas Tech roughly, and you've got the city of Babylon. And Babylon, we do have some remnants of Babylon, and they are glorious. Nebuchadnezzar was famous for beefing up the walls, making them stronger and wider. Whether this is true or not, they claim that you could drive 2 chariots simultaneously on top of the walls. They were wide enough to do that. Why would anybody want to? I don't know, but they really That was their boast about their thick walls. He also did the famous Ishtar Gates. I'll show you pictures of that in a minute. And also Nebuchadnezzar is the one that did the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. Now we have no archaeological remnants of that. Here's an artist's conception, National Geographic or something. Probably what it is some terraced gardens with a fancy irrigation system. And so Hanging Gardens of Babylon, they probably hang because they're on terraces in this deserty landscape, but they do have rivers flowing through. So if you can find a way of pumping the water up there, then they were supposed to be lush. By the way, we talked about King David being a manly king, and especially because he was a poet and a singer, which we don't always associate with alpha males. One of the things that the Babylonians and even more the Persians also thought was a characteristic of an alpha male was being a good gardener. If you were a manly warrior man, you better also know how to garden and keep things growing in a desert as a sign of life. So that's kind of fascinating. So big gardens is not out of character. It's an ostentatious show of my kingly power that I can make this gigantic garden grow out here in the arid land.
Well, Jim, isn't Babylon on the Euphrates River?
So you have the irrigation. So you just have to, you've got the river there. So yep. So that's why the Fertile Crescent is shaped like it is because of water. So very good. The other famous thing is the Ishtar Gates. This is a model and artist conception. I'll show you the real deal in a minute, but just this enormous, if you can imagine coming into a city with this long causeway with these blue bricks, it must have been beautiful at the time. And Nebuchadnezzar's boast is this: I, Nebuchadnezzar, laid the foundation of the gates down to the groundwater level and had them built out of pure blue stone. Well, they're glazed bricks, but okay, pure blue stone. Upon the walls in the inner room of the gate are bulls and dragons, and thus I magnificently adorned them with luxurious splendor for all mankind to behold in awe. Great boast from Nebuchadnezzar here. The Germans excavated the Ishtar Gates, and so the things are sitting in Berlin now, just like the British, when they excavated things, took stuff off to the British Museum in London. So there is the Ishtar Gate with the blue brick walls and the animals that Nebuchadnezzar described. And, they're still big and awe-inspiring at this scale to human beings. But imagine back 580 BC, how just mind-blowing that must have been. And these animals and flowers and motifs in gold and blue and just a great artistic work there. Yes, please.
Is that the actual gate that was excavated?
That is,
reconstructed?
yeah, that's chunks brought back by the Germans to Berlin. So that's sitting in some museum, great museum in Berlin. I've never been to Berlin, so haven't seen this. I've seen, it's like the Elgin marbles in the British Museum from the Parthenon. Parallel thing. The Ishtar Gates sit in Berlin. And then there are all kinds of modern issues. Should we repatriate these ruins back to their home country? Well, some people say, yes, you should. And others say, well, it's kind of dangerous there right now, so maybe they're better preserved. I mean, ISIS destroyed a lot of stuff from the Babylonian period because it was not Muslim, it was pagan. And so maybe it is safer elsewhere. That's a live debate right now. But yeah, those are pieces of it there. They got them on this wall and this wall, and it's a big room they display them in. All right, so we think of the Jews in exile here in this huge metropolis, 250,000, 1,800, 2,000 acres, but we don't have any evidence that they were locked up, except for the kings. The Bible does talk about the kings being imprisoned. Is that house arrest? Is that in a jail cell, dungeon cell? Also talks about one of the kings later being brought back out and being able to sit in the Babylonian king's court for the rest of his life after being 25 years in prison. So we probably don't need to think of the Jews as being in a concentration camp or in some kind of gulag setting. They're probably living in the city, just scattered through it. Or maybe there's a Jewish neighborhood. We have no good evidence at this point exactly how they were arranged in the city of Babylon. But looking at the way Ezekiel is free to come and go, he was in a neighboring town in Babylon, but looking at the way he was free to come and go, it does not look like they're under any kind of restrictions, except that they got to live there. They can't move back to their homeland. So they're in exile, but it seems like it's business as usual. Make your living, make your life here in this Babylonian city. You're in exile. You're being forced to be in exile by a foreign government. So it's not peachy keen, but it's probably not as horrible as being imprisoned in exile. Because we'll talk about this next week when they have the opportunity to go back. A lot of them say, "Nah, we'll stay here. We're good." And they stay there well into the 20th century, and the descendants do too. So we'll talk about that next week. And then remember, we talked about this last week too. The prophet Jeremiah wrote to the exiles in Babylon and says, "Thus says the Lord, you were taken into exile by Nebuchadnezzar, but God says to all the exiles whom I, the Lord, have sent into exile," so God's really in charge, not Nebuchadnezzar, "build your houses, live in them, plant your gardens, eat your produce of your gardens, take wives, have sons and daughters, get them married off, let them bear kids, multiply there, do not decrease." You're in it for the long haul. Live in Babylon, exist in Babylon, and pray for the welfare of Babylon. While you're there in that city, make sure that city thrives, which is something the Jews would do later. When they were scattered throughout Europe, they would also, try to make wherever they were, they would work for that area, that city. St. Augustine later uses this in the City of God. I've mentioned that in a couple sermons this spring. We're citizens of the heavenly city, but God also places us in earthly context. So we need to work. That doesn't mean we should be off by ourselves, not doing anything, but we need to work for the good of whatever earthly context God has put us in, knowing that it will never be as perfect as God's heavenly kingdom. But we need to do the best we can with where God has placed us for now in human terms. So Jeremiah suggests that it comes into later Christian theology as well. And then that second part, we also did this last week, of the same prophecy from Jeremiah. When Babylon's 70 years are complete, I'll visit you and bring you on back. Turns out to be pretty close for the first exile. So, and God says, even though you're in Babylon, I have plans for your welfare to give you a future with hope. I will eventually hear you. You're in the timeout box. You're in the penalty box. Things have been messed up. But use this as an opportunity, draw close to me, and I'll bring you back and draw close to you. So there is that aspect of the Babylonian exile. On the other hand, it still is exile. And we go back to this wonderful lament psalm from Psalm 137. This is the part we read in worship because the last 3 verses are horrible, and we skip those, and probably rightly so. Probably not a great way to praise God with those last 3 verses. But the Psalms, we'll talk about the Psalms in early or mid-April. The Psalms contain the full raft of human emotions, positive and negative. And Psalm 37 has one of the darkest endings of any psalm. So we got the sadness of being in Babylon, can't sing God's song. So if I forget you, Jerusalem, may my harp playing hand wither and forget his skill, and let my tongue just glue itself to the roof of my mouth. I won't sing anything if I don't remember you, Jerusalem. And then we get the dreaded final 3 verses. Remember, O Lord, and this is our prayer book version. Remember, O Lord, against the people of Edom, who said, down with it, even to the ground. Remember the way the Edomites treated us. That was bad. And so, O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy the one who pays you back for what you have done to us. Happy shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rocks. Blessed are those who bash babies of your babies, because you have done this naughty, bad thing to us. Probably not the best thing for us to contemplate in worship, bashing babies. But at times, humans are angry and sad and distraught, and this shows the depth of some of the feeling in Babylon by at least one Jewish exile who writes this. You've done such a bad thing to us. We should bash your babies against the rocks. So it's very dark feelings. So while it is probably not a gulag or concentration camp, it also is exile still. We shouldn't forget all that. Okay, thoughts or questions so far? I'm going to dive into the prophet Ezekiel for a good chunk of the rest of our time here, but wanted to. Y'all are quiet today. Okay, very good. Well, let's talk about Ezekiel. Ezekiel was part, as we said, of that first wave of exiles who went in 597. Apparently, he's a priest who's taken off into exile. What good is a priest outside the temple? Well, not much, but he can be a prophet if God calls him to be, and God does call him to be. And remember, this is one of the formative things too. Right now, remember we said the Jewish people are starting to really cohere as a Jewish group. And Ezekiel's theology and what Ezekiel is prophesying and saying is an important part of this movement, because it is a strong reminder that God is not constrained to international borders. We've talked about this before, but the general mindset is that gods were geographical in influence, and if your God was stronger than another God, they would take over your God's geography, and they would have battles, and they would fight in wars and all of that. And so the usual answer, and we've discussed this before, if the Jewish people were conquered, it's because their God was weak or dead. And in any event, he would be constrained to his country. Well, God comes to Ezekiel in Babylon. God is not constrained by geography, and we'll see some strong stuff that says even more about God's power and sovereignty in Ezekiel here. So God is still God, and this is also when the Jewish people are really starting to strongly become monotheistic. God's the only real God. All the gods of the nations are but idols. It is the Lord who makes the heavens and the earth. Not your Babylonian gods. You may think Marduk is the Babylonian god. It is Ahura Mazda for the Persians. But anyway, so you may think that Marduk's in charge, but Marduk's nothing. Marduk's an idol. Our God's the only God. And he shows that fact by showing up even in your capital city to talk to us, or even in your heartland to talk to us. So that's an important part of Ezekiel. And I wanted to spend a little time with Ezekiel's call narrative from the first chapter, because it's one of my favorite things here. Now, this is like Isaiah's call. Isaiah's call in chapter 6, he has an experience of God in the temple, on the throne, high and lifted up. But Isaiah can only see God's hem of God's robe. God is so big, so lofty. Filling the hem of his robe is enough to fill everything up. He can't perceive with all the clouds and smoke and incense and fluttering angels all around. He can't see God. Moses couldn't see God. Moses got to see God's backside. So there's this same kind of imagery going to be in Ezekiel. And Ezekiel also, has some pretty wild imagery. We'll look at that. It's not quite as full-blown and wild as the book of Daniel or the book of Revelation, which are apocalyptic works, but as we'll discuss in a couple of weeks, we're starting to head that way with some prophecies, starting to head in that direction with kind of fantastical visions that some of the prophets are having. So in the 30th year, 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the river Chebar in Babylon, the heavens were open, and I saw visions of God. So I'm sitting here in Babylon, and God appears to me. God's not dead, and God's not stuck back in the ruins of Israel saying, oh man, my temple's destroyed. God appears powerfully to Ezekiel in the middle of things. And it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. So about 592-ish, even before the second wave of exile. The word of God came to Ezekiel, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, another word for Babylonians. And the hand of God came upon him there. And then he has this wild vision, a stormy wind out of the north. So you got kind of a deserty wind, a great cloud, dust cloud, moisture cloud. We've seen haboobs. Maybe a haboob is not a bad picture of some of this. But a haboob with brightness around it and fire within it. So it's a different kind of storm. Storms are dark, and yet this one is bright and flashing fire within it. And in the middle of the fire is something amber, glowing yellowish in the middle. And in the middle of all that is something like 4 living creatures. And so we've got 4 creatures, but each of the creatures had 4 faces and 4 wings. So we've actually got 16 faces altogether. So this is a little bit different. Daniel and or Revelation uses these same creatures later. And Revelation uses a lot of Old Testament imagery, but these 4 same creatures are used in that. Same 4 faces. So one of them had a human being, one had the face of a lion, one had the face of an ox, and one face was the face of an eagle. And their wings were spread out, and each creature had 2 wings, and they touched the wings of another. So these big, giant, wild creatures. Well, what's this about the faces? Eagle, ox, lion, human. Well, who's the toughest herbivore? They didn't have elephants in their area. The ox is the biggest, toughest herbivore that they knew of. So face of an ox. Who's the toughest carnivore? Well, it's the lion. Who's the toughest bird of the air? The apex bird of the air is the eagle. And who's the apex creature of all is the human being. So these are faces of kind of the apex of creation, the highest beings of their order, and the angels encompass all of this. Each of these angels has these 4 faces. Also, if you have 4 faces, you ain't going to be surprised from whatever direction things are coming. So these angels are powerful. You're not going to catch an angel with 4 faces by surprise, especially because they're going to have some extra eyes too. So these are powerful beings. And Bob asked, how does this morph into the gospel? So that was something the later church came up with. These 4 creatures started getting identified with the gospels, and in Revelation they're split off 4 faces on 4 different angels instead of the same 4 faces on 4 different angels. So really, Ezekiel is more like this, kind of one angel with 4 faces, but we have this view of 4 angels with 4 faces: ox, eagle, lion, and man. And you got 4 things, and what do we have 4 of in Christianity? We got 4 gospels, so maybe we should use these as symbols. The hilarious thing is if you look back over the history of these 4 faces being applied to gospels, they've been applied to gospels for a long, long, long time, going back to the 300s, 200s maybe, but they're not uniform. And so for some, the ox is the Gospel of Matthew, and for some, the ox is, what we have now is Matthew is the man, Mark is the lion, John is the eagle, Matthew is the ox. But all those things were mixed up, and different people said different things at different times in the past. They used different symbols for the Gospels before it kind of got locked in, maybe 800s or 900s. I'm not sure when that got locked in. The excuse is that Matthew focuses on Jesus as Son of Man and also his human genealogy, so the man. Mark starts out with John the Baptist crying like a voice in the wilderness, so like a lion in the wilderness. Luke talks about Jesus going to Jerusalem to be sacrificed, and that's a huge part of his ethos, so maybe the sacrificial ox. And John the eagle soars theologically. So those are the attributions that they give, but there were other views at other times in Christian history that had them assigned different ways, but we associate them with the 4ness of the Gospels. And you'll often see that kind of symbolism in Christian art, old and new. It's in ancient stained glass windows and old carvings, and the Book of Kells has it, and there's some very wild modern versions out there as well. Some of them are really wild and abstract. Okay, so we've got these 4 living creatures here, and then there's this business of wheels. There's a wheel with each of the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them, but the wheels are not normal wheels. They're really something like wheels within a wheel. The old spiritual Ezekiel saw 2 wheels are rolling way in the middle of the air. Well, actually sees 4, and each one's double. And when they moved in any of the 4 directions without veering as they moved. So think about this. What is their picture of a wheel? Well, their picture of a wheel is an ox cart. 2 big slabs on a 1 axle, or a chariot wheel. Again, 2 wheels on an axle. How do chariots turn? Well, you don't turn the wheels. You don't have a steering wheel. You gotta have the horses pull it in a circle if you want to turn it. Same with an ox cart. If you want to turn an ox cart, the wheels are locked together, so you've got to do a wide turn. But these wheels are almost more like modern casters. They can go in any direction they want. It's a wild thought back then. People are used to wheels only going forward and backward, but these wheels can roll in any of the four directions. So these angels are highly mobile, far more than any human vehicle at the time would be. That's the message here. And what they're supporting is going to be important too. So these creatures are forming the base of a vehicle, basically, and this vehicle is highly mobile. It is, powerfully built and is able to move at an instant. Doesn't have to be pulled in a direction. It can change directions completely at random, however it wants to go. It's got full mobility. So wheels within wheels. And then on top of the creatures, he describes a dome, something like a dome shining with crystals. So there's kind of some kind of platform structure that these wheels are supporting, some kind of domed structure here. And on top of that dome, there was something like a throne. So what we've really got here is God's chariot, God's throne room. God's throne is mobile, and God's throne is more mobile than any human chariot or cart has ever been up to this point. It can go any direction it wants to. So here's a powerful message. If you think God is dead or stuck in languishing and weakness back in Israel, God's on a chariot that can move better than any human chariot. He's stronger than any human king. He's got these powerful, they may have armies, but he's got these angelic beings at his command. God is top dog, not Nebuchadnezzar. And we get this wonderful stuff. Some of it's kind of, it looks like blue. We had amber, but we got blue. There's something that looks like a human form up there. It's hard to see because it's up there in all this glow, blue and amber and fire. And it looked like loins and splendor all around. And yet it's kind of like a rainbow. So just this wild vision that Ezekiel really can't pin down. Is it gold? Is it blue? Is it rainbow colored, fiery? Yeah, it's everything. God's throne is everything. It has the totality of glory on it. And then my favorite line in Ezekiel 1, Isaiah can't see God. He only sees the hem of God's garment. Moses only gets to see God's backside. Ezekiel the priest is not going to claim, okay, I've got a good lock on God here. No, he's just seeing God with all this glory, all this cloud, all this fire, all this smoke. And so he says, and I love the triple description here, this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So we've got three. So we've got the Lord, and we've got three things insulating us from the Lord's actual presence. We've got God's glory surrounding him, but we're really not even seeing God's glory. We're seeing the likeness of God's glory, and we're really not even seeing the likeness of God's glory. This is the appearance to me of the likeness of the glory of God. And so God is so magnificent. I can't lock it down. I can't see it super clearly, but it is an amazing thing to behold. And then a voice speaks, and or actually, I fall on my face, Ezekiel says, when I see God, good reaction, and the voice of someone speaks. And then we go to chapter 2, and God calls Ezekiel to be a prophet. So it's just an amazing, to think of God being weak and stuck. God is mobile, powerful, and present is the strong message of this part of Ezekiel. One of the great call narratives in Scripture of a prophet. Just wild imagery, so wild that we had those theories in the 70s, Eric von Daniken or whoever it was, that this was really a UFO that Ezekiel saw. That's the only way to explain it. No, this is God's throne and God's chariot all wrapped up in one. Mobile, powerful, glorious, splendorous, magnificent. Okay, thoughts about that before we keep going on with Ezekiel here? I see John hitting mute or unmute. Yeah, John.
Yes, Jim, how is that, I know it's insulated there, but by the appearance of the likeness of the glory, but how is that consistent with not representing God, which I understand is central to Judaism now.
Right, and I think the fact that it almost, to me, is I almost think of it as three filters. So you've got God there, but then there are these three cloudy filters around him. And this, one of the psalmists talks about God being in clouds and thick darkness. And Isaiah has him in clouds as well. And so you've got God at the core. We can see his light, we can perceive it somehow, and yet you've got this filter of his glory. And the glory was actually something separate almost in Judaism by this time. It was something that went out from God's presence and did things. So we've got the glory as a filter, and then over that is the likeness, and then we've got the appearance. So it's almost like three photographic filters that keep blurring things, or maybe frosted glass or something. That's the kind of imagery I think is what Ezekiel's trying to convey to us. So he sees the glow and the glory there, but you can't pin it down, and you can't take a crisp photograph of it because there's too much other stuff in between you and it. It shines through, and yet it's obscured at the same time. So, does that answer what you're asking?
Yes, and Jim, at the beginning, you gave this wonderful description, account of the continuation of Jewish identity through 2.5 centuries. And I wonder to what extent that, and you listed attribute, they followed the feast days and so forth, and circumcision, but also there's an exclusiveness about them and I wonder to what extent that has contributed to their preservation.
And that is part of the dark side. And we'll talk about that more in a couple of weeks with Ezra and Nehemiah, because when they come back to Israel, it looks like the Babylonian Jewish leadership is still very strong. And they're saying, as you're getting back to Israel, you need to not mix with foreigners. So there is an exclusivity to Judaism too. And that's the dark side that also keeps them together. The borders are not very permeable. If intermarrying with all of our neighbors has gotten us in trouble, gotten our ancestors in trouble, then we ain't going to do it. We're gonna put this shell around us, and so that also is a part. And thanks for bringing that up. And Ezra and Nehemiah will try to strengthen that shell, that force field, that barrier, and there will be some pushback in Scripture too. We'll talk more about that.
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Jim,
Yeah.
kind of related to that, who was leading the Jews in getting back to these practices?
That's kind of a fascinating thing. Who is in charge if there's no king anymore? We do have the king's descendants. There are some governors. The priests are still there. Ezekiel's a priest, but they don't have a temple to function. So it's a good question mark. Who really is in charge here? We're not exactly sure. One of the king's descendants will be sent back as a Persian governor of Israel, but he's not going to be the king. So it's a good question. How much, later they will be able to reconstitute the temple and have a very strong temple hierarchy. But also we're starting to get the movement of rabbis starting to percolate up. And that will also become stronger in the centuries that follow. And so I think things are in flux with that, with the leadership. But nevertheless, Babylon is going to be a center of leadership of whatever level it is for a long time to come for the Jews. It's going to be a strong Jewish center from this point until the Middle Ages, until it starts to wane in influence. Well, that's a good question, though.
Just sort of a follow-up. Would it be similar to Christian communities that form in cultures where Christianity was not prominent? So, like house churches in early Christianity, is that how they were practicing?
No, that could be. You don't have the temple anymore, so what are you going to do? I mean, eventually synagogues will rise up. All we need is 10 Jews to gather together, 10 Jewish men to form a synagogue and study the Torah together. And so that will be something that will also grow out of this. And so that could be a piece of things there too in its infancy stages. We don't have a lot of documentation. We know a lot about the Jewish community in the time after Jesus in Babylon. That's when they are doing their heaviest writings. What they're doing at this point, we have to kind of rely on just a few things like Ezekiel. So making a lot of guesses and on how they kind of come out of this. But there are a lot of question marks, Regina. So good questions. Okay, well, after this is Ezekiel's call, and then the call will keep going in chapter 2 and chapter 3 and specific things. One of the things Ezekiel is going to do is going to give prophecies. Remember, this is still 5 or 6 years before the temple is destroyed and Jerusalem's destroyed. This is the first wave of exile. And so he gives prophecies about the destruction of the temple. He also very poignantly narrates that God's glory is going to depart from the temple. God's not going to be in the temple when it gets destroyed. God's going to abandon the temple. It's not Marduk gaining control over God. Elvis is leaving the building before that happens. You all have messed up so much that God's not going to be in this temple anymore. Remember, in Solomon's time, there is a narration of God's glory coming into the temple. Well, Ezekiel has the reverse. God's glory is going to leave the temple before it gets destroyed here. And there are also in Ezekiel lots of these prophecies against the nations that we get in the other prophets as well. We get quite a bit of that. But one of the unique things in Ezekiel that is not really in a lot of other prophets is enacted prophecies. And Ezekiel is told to do a lot of physical things, to be an object lesson. Now, we did have Hosea being told to marry a prostitute, and that's pretty. That involves your time. That's not something that you're just going to be able to walk in and give a prophecy and leave. But Ezekiel has some of these enacted things he's called upon to do. Chapter 4, God calls him to take a brick and make it a model Jerusalem, basically, and build some ramps and siege works against it, and take an iron plate and put it between you and the city as a symbol of the siege that's going to come to Jerusalem. And then, God, I can't imagine being asked to do this. Then lie on your left side for 390 days, God says, presumably near this model of Jerusalem, to talk about the punishment of Israel, the place in the north, and then flip over to your right side for 40 days to talk about the punishment of the house of Judah. I'm glad God has not called me to take 430 days to lay there on one side than the other. And what really gets gross, actually, is during that time, bake bread, and this is how you make it, and you're going to bake it on human dung to show how bad things have gotten. The things have gotten unclean among the nations. And Ezekiel actually pushes back and says, God, I can't use human dung. That would be horribly unclean to touch the dung of a human being. And God says, okay, cow dung. We'll make it an animal dung that you can touch. Oh, great, thanks, God. So have to cook my bread on cow dung for the next 430 days. So we have these strange enacted prophecies Ezekiel is called to do. So he's not like Isaiah in doing these, it's not just long teachings, though he does do some of those. We've got these enacted physical things as well. And to be, we have a little of that in Jeremiah. Jeremiah, go to the potter's house and you see what God's saying to you there a little bit. But Ezekiel really is the prophet of enacted prophecy. There are some other famous things in Ezekiel, though. Chapter 34, we read this on Good Shepherd Sunday, oftentimes, talking about the shepherds of Israel, the bad shepherds of Israel who have been feeding themselves. Shepherds should feed their sheep. But you bad shepherds, you've been eating the fat, you've clothed yourselves with wool, you've slaughtered the fatlings, and you're not feeding your sheep. You haven't strengthened the weak, you haven't healed the sick, you haven't bound up the injured, you haven't brought back the strayed, you've not sought the lost, you haven't done what shepherds do for their sheep. But with force and harshness, you've ruled them. And so God's judgment is because the leadership of Israel was bad, of Judah was bad, the sheep are scattered. The shepherds are bad, the sheep are scattered, and they are prey to wild animals. But there is some hope. So there's judgment on the shepherds. God says, I'm against you. I'm going to ask for the sheep back and put a stop to you being in charge of these sheep. This is probably directed perhaps against priests and against kings at this point. And Ezekiel is a priest, don't forget, so it's his own. But God himself will step in as shepherd. God will seek out the lost, rescue them from all the places they've been scattered, bring them back. I myself will shepherd the sheep. I'll make them lie down in green pastures, Psalm 23, hint, hint. Nice remnant, nice echo of that. God will seek the lost. I'll bring back the strayed. I'll bind up the injured. All the things you're not going to do, you haven't done, I will step in and do. I will be the good shepherd. I'll feed them with justice. And of course, Christians, later see this also as something Jesus will do as the Good Shepherd in John. So it's a wonderful prophecy. The Roman Catholic musician John Michael Talbot, who was a monk, he's still a monk, but he's a lay monk now instead of a celibate monk. But he's a singer, and he had a song about the Reformation, and he used this against his own Roman Catholic Church. The reason for the Reformation basically was because some of the shepherds were not taking care of the sheep anymore, so God scattered them. But one day God will regather all Christians. It's an interesting take on that. All right, Ezekiel 37, another famous one. This house also has a spiritual. Ezekiel saw them dry bones. Ezekiel saw them dry bones. So valley full of bones. What can be less hopeful? What can be more desolate than a valley full of dead bones? Death is unclean. Dead bodies are unclean. And these aren't even bodies anymore. They're picked over bones. And God says to him, mortal, can these bones live? Ezekiel fudges and says, God, you're the one who knows the answer. Lord God, you know. And God says, prophesy these bones. You're my prophet. Say to the bones, dry bones, hear God's word. I'll cause breath to enter you. You shall live. I'll lay sinews on you and will cause flesh to come upon you. I'll cover you with skin and put breath in you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am the Lord. This is one of the early resurrection things, perhaps. Now, are they being resurrected individually or being resurrected as a people? Some scholars suggest this is more as a people, and so maybe it's not individual resurrection here, but God is going to take these dry bones and bring them back to life. And then there's a narration, I skip over that, and what God says will happen, happens. And the bones start rattling together, and they start growing stuff, sinews and muscle and flesh, and they are brought back to life out of death. And then God gives the interpretation, mortal prophet Ezekiel, these bones are Israel. You all are saying our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off completely, we're in exile. But God says, I'm going to open your grave, I'm going to bring you out of this death state you're in. I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. That way you'll know that I'm God. When I open your grave, when I bring you up, when I put your spirit in you. You can see why Christians also see resurrection imagery here. Perhaps it's more about bringing back the people here, but there is some real resurrection imagery for Christians here in chapter 37. And finally, real quick, finally in chapter 40 to 48, there's an extended prophecy about the temple being rebuilt, and it's going to be a perfect temple. Ezekiel goes into great details about that. And this really is very apocalyptic. This is kind of early proto-apocalyptic writing in some ways. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. And water will flow out of the temple, and it will flow either up the Mount of Olives, or the temple will be raised up. The mountain it's on will be even higher, so it'll flow down the Mount of Olives. Scholars disagree. And will flow even down to the Dead Sea, that salt lake, and will rejuvenate the Dead Sea itself. So not only will they be fish in the Mediterranean on one side of Israel, even the Dead Sea will have fish. It'll be a fertile lake again, because God's temple will be flowing out. This is one of the things you say during Easter when you sprinkle people with holy water. I saw water proceeding from the temple from the right side of the flow. Anyway, so bottom line for Ezekiel, ultimately God is not constrained by geography. Ultimately God is in charge of history. He's the one that allows Nebuchadnezzar to do this. He will bring the people back when it's historically right for that to happen. God will eventually bring his people back to the promised land, and God's glory will come back to the temple. It's going to depart from the temple will be destroyed, but then God's glory will come back in a new way, in a new and perfect temple. And so Ezekiel has a lot of hope for a people who are in exile. God is there, God is powerful, and God promises restoration. And so it's a very hopeful prophet. He's a hopeful prophet in the midst of the exile in Babylon. So next week, we will see the end of Babylon. We'll see the rise of the Persians, and we'll have the beginning of some restoration in Israel. It's going to be in stages, and it's not going to be complete. Like I said, a lot of people choose to stay in Babylon, a lot of Jews, but that's where we'll be going next time. Any final thoughts or questions? Yeah, Bob.
Will there be, and I just don't know, will there be prophecy or prophetic writing predicting or leading towards the Roman destruction and exile?
Some would say Jesus gives prophetic utterances about that. He does talk about the temple being destroyed with the Romans. There is a vision in Daniel of a statue made up of different kinds of stuff, which is succeeding empires. And there's disagreements about whether the Romans are included in that or not. Certainly the Greeks are by that point. But the question is whether the Persians are. The question is whether that also applies to the Romans also eventually being destroyed. Good question. Revelation, that's actually a lot of Rome being destroyed. They use the name Babylon, but when they say Babylon in Revelation, they mean Rome. So it's not Old Testament prophecy so much with Rome, but there will be a continuation of this apocalypticism into Christianity, both from Jesus's mouth and from his followers, that will predict some of that. So good question. Anything
Dan?
else? Yeah, Jim.
Just a small thing. I think you were talking about all the gospel images and everything and the symbols. I just was going to say it's also on the gospel book covers that we.
Thank you. Yeah, if you look closely at those metal book covers that you can't even see because we're not processing them right now, if you're on the Altar Guild, take a look sometime. Those 4 things are there. I've got them somewhere in my office. I know I've got them in a couple places actually. Can't glance them anyway, but it's wonderful, wonderful artistic representation. So good symbolism. The chapel at one of the Roman Catholic retreat centers in Amarillo has some marvelous modern stained glass versions of those 4 animals. So cool.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, we'll stop there. We'll pick up next time with some early restoration. And everybody have a great week and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.